Hello, my name is Ali Yousefi. Welcome to the Test Automation and EasyRepro series. This edition for Automating EasyRepro, we're going to discuss how to configure a build pipeline in Azure DevOps. We'll discuss what are Azure pipelines, dig into setting up the build pipeline using the .NET Desktop template, configuring continuous integration, a demo of setting up a build pipeline, some best practices, and finally, some references. What are Azure pipelines? Azure pipelines are fully featured continuous integration and continuous delivery, otherwise known as CI and CD service. You start with code. From there, you automate build, testing, and deployment to any cloud platform. For EasyRepro, we will focus on the planning, the code, the build, the test, and the release pieces. Setting up the build pipeline. Our first step is to point to the source code repository where our source code is going to reside. This is for Azure DevOps Online. Azure DevOps Server would be a bit different. You see we have Azure repos, the Git here. We have Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise Server, otherwise known as GHE, other Git repositories, and Subversion. For our demo, we're actually going to use the classic editor here, which is this linked here that's highlighted. This allows us to use a visual task selector versus YAML. Also, it's key to note that the YAML can be extracted from any of the tasks we'll be using so that we can use the advanced editor later. All right, so once you choose your source code repository, in our case, we chose Git, we're going to be prompted to choose to start with an empty job or choose various templates to kick off with. We're going to actually start with the .NET Desktop template. I find it's helpful. It has all of the steps we really need to kick off our EasyRepro unit test. Here's an example here of what it has. It has the NuGet tool installer task, the NuGet restore, which is helpful for any of your NuGet packages that you may have, including the web drivers, the Selenium packages. We will use the MS build task and the VS test task. The VS test task is key to any of our EasyRepro pipelines. We'll start off by choosing what type of test we're going to be running. In our case, we will be running test assemblies. We'll point to what test files we want to. We'll choose what files and what folders in the Visual Studio solution contain our unit test. We'll say where on our build agent are we actually storing the test. For test filter criteria, we can decide, do we want to run specific tests based off of a priority, a class name, any criteria that we've set up. And we can choose to run only impacted tests. This will help us speed up test. For execution options, we can choose which test platform, including the latest version of Visual Studio. We can choose a run settings file that's within our source code. And we can choose to overrun certain parameters inside of that run settings file with build pipeline variables. Finally, once we've configured our build pipeline, we will set up a trigger for continuous integration. This will allow us to kick off the build pipeline once a developer commits changes. This can also be helpful for running regression or performance tests based off of time intervals. For this demo of automating EasyRepro, we will demonstrate how to set up and run EasyRepro within a pipeline to introduce quality to our builds. For this demo of automating EasyRepro, we will demonstrate how to set up and run EasyRepro within a pipeline to introduce quality to our builds. Welcome to this demo of automating EasyRepro. For this demo, we will create a build pipeline. So we're going to start by clicking on the Pipelines button on the left-hand side. We'll click on Builds. and we have no pipelines. We'll go ahead and click New Pipeline. And you'll see you'll start with where is your code. We have all the different source code repositories. For this demo, we're going to stick with the classic editor, so we'll use this button here. Click that. It'll ask us what our source is. Since we've already stored this in the Azure Git repository here, we'll point to whatever project, whatever repository, and what branch we're going to use. Say we want to use develop, for instance. So choose what you like and hit continue. And you'll see that it'll navigate here where you can start with an empty job, configuration as code, or use featured templates such as .NET Desktop, Android, ASP.NET, and so on. For our case, we are going to just use the .NET Desktop as it contains everything we need. And you see it has auto-populated with a few tasks here, including installing the NuGet tool installer, using the NuGet restore task, building a solution with MS Build. We're using VS Test for test assemblies, and we can publish any sort of symbols and so on, and then finally copy artifacts, so any compiled assemblies and so on from this build solution, and they'll be put into a drop folder here. Okay, so first thing I want to do is go ahead and give this pipeline a name. So we'll do something like automating EasyRepro demo. We'll use a Azure Pipelines agent pool and the agent specification of VS 2017-Win 2016. These are out of scope for this demo. We'll follow up on another demo regarding what are agent pools, specifications, and how you could run on different pools, including Linux or even containers. So you see here we have the Git sources, which points to what we set up earlier with our branch and so on, and decides if we want to do a shallow fetch or so on here. For our agent job, this will run on the agent. We could give it a name. If we wanted to say build and test EasyRepro unit test, and you see that changes. You see the NuGet tool installer here, 4.4.1. It's going to do a restore of all of the packages that are inside of the solution file. You see it's basically looking for any .sln, so it'll find our solution, same as here. So we go into the Visual Studio build. This will use MS Build. You see it's using the latest version of Visual Studio. There's different versions here if you needed it. Here's the arguments you could pass into MS Build, and so on, different configurations you could set up. Next is the VS Test assemblies. This is the core task we'll be running for this pipeline. So this one here allows us to choose from different types of test. We're going to stick with test assemblies for this demo here. For test files, this is using some keywords to try to find the DLL of our unit test. As you see, it says star test star.dll, so it's looking for any DLL inside of our build configuration pipeline variable that has the name test inside of it. So I went ahead and went back over to the EasyRepro unit test project here. You can see where this might be a challenge. The name of the unit test DLL is actually going to be Microsoft.Dynamics 365.UIAutomation.sample. As you can see here, there's the assembly name, right? So for our case, this isn't necessarily going to work because we don't have a assembly with the word test in it. So we're going to want to change this to say sample. And that should work there. So the next is the search folder. We can leave that where it's at. It's just using the working directory where it's been working with all the compiled assemblies from this build task. Test filter criteria allows us to do certain things by putting in class names, unit test names, test categories. So we could do something like fully qualified name, and we could add in here. So I went ahead and filled this out. You can see I have the namespace and then the test class name, automating EasyRepro Build Pipeline. So it'll run every unit tested finds within this class here. The running only impacted test allows us to run only specific tests to help us kind of speed up the test, and you could, when you set this, you'll see that it says, you should run all tests after a certain number of builds. Um, you can for this test mix contains UI test. You can check this. I found that EasyRepro test worked just fine without it, so this seems to be optional here. For execution options, you can see we can point to a specific test run settings file here. So I can go to, for instance, the one that's in the sample code. So I believe it's in here. It's Azure DevOps. So you can point, and you'll see that it points to this run settings. Now this is key, this override test run parameters. This is where we can kind of pass in some build pipeline variables to override what's inside of the settings file. So I'm going to pre-populate here something and show. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find the run settings as an online username, an online password, an online CRM URL, and an Azure key parameter. So I've gone to the Solution Explorer, to the EasyRepro run settings in Visual Studio. And you can see here's the different parameters. It's in this test run parameters node: online username, online password, online CRM URL, browser type, and Azure key, which will correlate to what we've done here. So what I'm doing is I'm overriding those with build variables. So how to get to the build variables is actually here on this tab. You click variables, and I've already pre-populated some of these here. So I have the application insights instrumentation key, the org here, my password, and the username. So this allows us to pass this in at runtime, so we don't have to hard code variables or even passwords and so on inside of files that we're checking in. Finally, for the reporting artifacts, we can add a test run title. So we could say something like automating EasyRepro test results. We could say, upload the test attachment. So that would be things like the TRX file, any screenshots we may have recorded, and so on. And that's it. You can hit save. You could put a certain folder if you want. And you can queue it off and fill in the variables that we put it here in the variables. And then that's one more thing to cover I missed was for continuous integration here. You're going to go to the triggers pipeline, and you're going to click enable continuous integration, and you can say, which branch has changes when they get committed to it to kick this off. And you can see there's even path filters. So if you wanted to choose particular paths that this came into, you can do that. There's different branches. That's it for the demo. Thank you very much. For best practices for working with build pipelines in EasyRepro, review your VS test task and work with the test criteria. This seems to be the best way to ensure that your pipelines don't get out of control and run hundreds and hundreds of tests. So look to really focus on understanding what you can do to restrict, filter, using the decorations that you could add to your unit test. Also, finally, consider using YAML pipeline for maintainability, reusability, and scalability. Finally, we'll leave with some references, including the EasyRepro GitHub repository and the blog post, Test Automation in EasyRepro, adding EasyRepro test to Azure DevOps, which goes into creating the same build pipeline we did, as well as talking through some of the test results artifacts. Thank you for watching this edition of the Test Automation in EasyRepro series. You can find my contact information in the slide here, as well as in the description below. Thanks.